Hello and welcome to the 1311 release post retro. I'm Sarah. I was the release post manager for 1311. I've got Phil, who is the technical advisor, and Mark Wood, who was the release post shadow. We're missing quite a few people from the release post team. So in the spirit of transparency, we are going to record this and we'll delegate items asynchronously on the retro issue to people as we move through. All right. First one we got from Cindy. This had to do with questions surrounding logos and the use of those logos in the release post, what we're allowed to show or not allowed to show. Sometimes it's with a partner, sometimes it's not with a partner. So her point on what to improve was it wasn't exactly clear on when we can use logos or not. Do we need approval? That seems like something that product marketing should do and detail in the release post handbook. So I'm going to assign it to Cindy. What do you guys think? Think that's a reasonable assignment?
Yeah, totally.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate the support. Okay. Great. Next one. It's going to be the most efficient meeting ever. Okay, so another thing that happened during the release post is there is a task in the release post MR task list that one tells the PMM to do it and two tells them to do it too late. So essentially we need to, on the 18th or the 19th, be completing this particular task, and it should be the release post manager's job. And it is just another, actually this one has to do with top and primary. So it's a reminder, hey, these are the ones we've picked for top and primary. Please let the release post manager and the messaging lead know in case they didn't make it, because it's always kind of a neck and neck race to the finish line. We're preparing the release post at the same time that people are trying to get their features in. So we're going to do async on this. And I'm going to ask Farnoosh what her thoughts are. Mark, if you have any thoughts on this, as she'll be doing this next, let me know.
I don't think I have any immediate thoughts, but I think, yeah, we should definitely ask Farnoosh about this because it seems like we just want to clean up what should be done. I don't think it matters one way or another as long as it's crisp.
Okay. I agree. So I'm going to say change date of task to, I'm going to say the 19th. As that still gives us a couple days coming up to the 22nd to change the intro. Because when a primary feature doesn't make it and it's in the title and it's part of the theme, it's kind of a pain. So change date of task to the 19th, change owner of task to release post manager. Great. I'm gonna ask Cindy to modify the release post MR template. Great. Next. Ooh, okay, that is a long one.
There's some history here. Effectively, when viewing on a screen that's too narrow, it changes the order of the columns. So while it looks fine on a large screen, because I actually dug into this a bit, it looks normal, top, primary, secondary, and then we have deprecations and removals. If you scroll down, you'll see that Lee Trickett responded back on a narrower screen. It actually flips the order on some of these, and I think Eric Schroeder had a method for fixing that, but I'm not sure.
Thank you for the very succinct summary of that problem. Let's see what Eric said. Shouldn't be too difficult to separate the sections. Makes sense to put these immediately following the secondary features. I don't have it. Phil and Mark, as you have a ton of background on this, how do we typically change the order and structure of the release post? This needs to be done in the script, and who typically makes those changes?
I don't think it's a script issue. I think it's a CSS template issue. I believe currently those three things, bug fixes, performance improvements, and UX improvements, are within another CSS section. And we're relying on styles to move them around. And I think Eric's point is if we put them in their own section, then we could explicitly control how they would look when the resolution of the screen is modified. But I could be incorrect on that implementation details.
We did make one change 2 milestones ago, and it affects more than just the release post when you edit those existing styles. So I think what you're suggesting is if we move some of those styles to be just for the release post, then we'll have more control.
Okay, I'm trying to munch this together in my brain and figure out how to communicate to Farnoosh about what we think the change should be and where it should be made. Phil, is it indeed a CSS template stored somewhere else that we're using in the putting together of the release post blog?
Yeah, so there are 2 or 3 templates that are used that pull in these YAML files, and they use existing CSS classes. I think to iterate on this, we need to decide what we want the release post to look like, and then figure out what needs to be changed, and whether that affects other areas of the handbook, and whether we need to move things around. Who would be the best person to decide what the release post should look like once we make it?
Go for it, Mark.
I think Farnoosh would be a good one to start with, and she can collaborate with product marketing to ensure that it follows any sort of guidelines or priorities they have.
I just want to look at. Okay. So we obviously go top, primary, secondary. And then we go into our bug fixes, usability improvements, deprecations. And then I'm assuming performance improvements somewhere in here. Find it. Performance, is this always? Okay, that is a little weird.
Yeah, if you shrink the screen down, it gets even worse. Like if you're under 1200 pixels, the bug fix is like smack in the middle of the secondaries. It looks like. There you go.
There you go.
If you scroll up, you'll see what in the middle of like secondary features thing a bug fix is, and then we go back to like usability.
And then they're right there. Yeah, and then there's more secondaries. Okay, so it doesn't need to be a huge change. We just need the ordering of everything to continue to be the same as we intended to be. Okay. So it needs to happen.
Now, what you want it to look like, you come up with a requirement. I'll help find someone who can make that happen.
And Phil, you can help us. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a very helpful conversation. Okay, moving on. Dan Jensen. So this is the age-old problem of, as we both race to the finish line, things appear in the release post for things that weren't shipped, or things make it into the release candidate that are not on the release post. So let's see. Discrepancy happens because there's no clear cutoff date for code to be merged.
I mean, I think this is a larger problem than what we can really tackle in the retro. The bigger problem here is that engineering works agilely in an truly agile way, and they snap a baseline, they'll continue to baseline, and when they have a release candidate that works out the way they want and passes testing, that's what they release. Which means that it could be the 17th, it could be before the 17th. If things after the 17th don't pass, it could be after. It's kind of a it's a truly agile method of doing things. Whereas the product and the release post, we don't do that. We try to schedule things and work in time boxes, and you try to merge the two together, and you're going to end up with this sort of issue.
On the monitor team, we had also tried to move the 15th up as sort of a cutoff date. But then you get into the situation where you have a primary feature that's not going to make it by the 15th, but everyone's really confident it'll make it by the 17th, and all of a sudden your virtual cutoff date isn't drawn in the sand, and you run into the same problem again.
I mean, in an ideal world, what would happen is the release post feature blocks would be predicated on the feature being in production, except that's not how our system works right now. Once we merge the feature, the code, even if we have a dependency for the release post block, the release post block will be merged. But just because it got merged doesn't guarantee it will hit production. And I think that's where we're tripping ourselves up.
I'm going to hit this ball to Farnoosh as someone who has a bigger eye to making larger improvements across the entirety of product operations process. I agree with you, Mark. I think it would be a lot easier if we, did the release post on the 25th of the month. And we did all of the content assembly on the 22nd after the candidate made it to production. So why do the horses have to be tied in the race? Why can't we have one go 3 days ahead of the other?
Well, yeah, the difficulty is we back off for content assembly and basically making a guess of where we're going to land. And it is what it is. It just makes it more difficult.
Okay, so I was going to say, so we can compile the release post. She's heard this a million times. Okay. I did not, I did spell it close enough to the word for it to guess for me. Great. All right. Now we get in, so one thing that we did really well, this particular race post, Mark, is as people had problems, a lot of the time we generated the MR as the problem happened. And so I'm thinking that a bunch of the ones moving forward could be checked. We'll see. Okay. Russell was our technical writer, and he had some problems checking release post images using the GitLab UI opposed to a local clone. He had to open the image. Got it. He already actioned it. I think it was just a tip on how to make it more efficient for future technical writer leads to check the size of each image. Okay, I'm gonna mark it done. So his is twofold. One is a tip, which he has an MR open for future technical writers to be able to more easily find the name of files. I also ran into this because you've got the name of someone's MR, and then you have the name of the branch, and then you have the name of the file. And oftentimes I'm kind of trying to essentially get to the content block and matching between those three things because no one ever names them anything the same. Why would they? Mark, I would love your feedback on this. Sometimes people, when they're trying to name their feature, put primary or secondary in there, or they put their name in there, or they put the name of their stage, or they put the name of their group instead of just naming the feature. What do you think?
We had guidance on this in the handbook that did state we were supposed to have the group name in there.
The group name in there? Let's go look.
Stage name. I believe there was something about that because it was a change that happened probably 4 or 5 releases ago.
I don't know why that didn't pull it back. This is engineering. Yeah, great. Okay. Naming files. PM should create file names that are descriptive and have reasonable overlap with the title of the content block itself. Great. This makes it easier to related content blocks by everyone fast.
This very well could have been updated since I last read it as well, because I know that Furnish has been making extensive changes here.
Okay, so it says do not use the category or the group name, or include the reporter's name.
Because you should be able to search the files if you have them checked out locally with a grep and get the content title. So it should really not be hard to find. It's hard to do it through the GUI. I will completely admit that. But I think if you check them out locally, if you're looking for a specific release post block, all you do is grep on the title and you're going to find the file.
So I think for someone as technically apt as you are, it's probably easy. And there's two ways we can solve this. One, we can make everyone a ninja on the command line. I'm not so sure that's going to be achieved in a reasonable time frame. I think the other way is to give a little bit more, remind people of how to name things, but that also might be a large effort.
It wouldn't hurt. Maybe what I'll do in this release post is when I do the kickoff, I'll put a note that says, hey, FYI, Completable Ps review this section on naming your content.
I think that would be great. I am going to ask Farnoosh if she wants additional action from here. Okay. My God, typing today. Okay. And then Mark, I'll just say you're gonna reiterate that. So I think one of the things, Mark, and maybe your solution does address this, but if I'm looking at the review app and I'm in the like middle of 77 features, and all I have is the name of the feature, like run GitLab on small instances, and the problem statement's not great, or maybe there's a spelling error that I need to fix. So I've got it pulled down locally. And you are grepping for what? Let's say Fabian did not name, the file is not named run GitLab on small instances, but we can just find that line of text somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So if you just do a grep and you do a recursive grep in the folder, what you just put in the title or something that's unique, and it will return all files and the lines of those files that have that text in it. So if it should be very easy using that. I mean, and you don't have to use command line grep. You can use, there's tons of search functionality in different editors. VS Code, I know, has searching amongst all the files in a project. So if you had this as a VS Code project, you could search across. I'm just most familiar with the command line.
Okay. I'm not trying to give you more work, but if you find yourself doing that during 1312 and you want to record yourself doing it in Zoom,
yeah,
that could be a great solution. Cool. Okay. Moving right along. Check this. All right. Spell checking did not go as expected. No, it did not. So a product manager writes a content block. They are a reasonable adult who knows how to spell. And so they are the first line of checking to see if things were spelled. Then, in most cases, a product marketing manager, also a reasonable adult who knows how to spell, reads it. Then the technical writer for that team is supposed to check for that. Then the release post manager is supposed to check for that. And then it gets to the final technical writing lead. So we had a decent number of spelling errors get all the way through all of those checks without people catching it. Let's see what Russell suggested as an action. So he suggests using veil instead of Grammarly.
I think he's talking about adding veil to the pipelines as a linter.
Sorry, but would that still be in lieu of needing to use Grammarly in a very manual way? Or would that just be an extra help?
Yeah, I talked to Farnoosh about this briefly, and I don't know how veil works. I've never used it. I assumed it was something that ran in the pipeline. I don't know why we don't have something like a Grammarly or a veil or some sort of tool that runs in our pipelines for all documentation changes that will fail the pipeline if you can't spell.
That's a great idea. Probably not actionable in this moment, but as Russell has indicated, that's a great thought.
I thought our web ID also underscored things that were spelled incorrectly.
I think it does, but not off the top of my head. It does not do a lot of grammar things.
It doesn't do grammar, that's correct.
Yeah. Some things were just blatantly misspelled. So,
yeah. We could look at using veil let's see how well it works on these files. Because we're talking about YAML files that we would need to be doing a spell check on. We could manually try using Veil. There's a lint doc shell script in the GitLab repository. I could copy that over and we could run it and see what output we're going to get and decide whether it's worth putting into the repository. Like Mark said, we can add it to the pipeline.
I mean, that would be awesome if you have the cycles to do that.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, I'll bring in one of the technical writers to help because they usually maintain that script.
Okay, so you're going to do a dry run of this beforehand.
I'll do a dry run to see if Veil works well with the YAML files.
Okay. I mean, if it works, then it should just be added to all pipelines for the handbook, which is obvious.
Sure.
I think the difficulty and why we've hesitated so long is if you did have a word that wasn't caught or was incorrectly flagged, there'd need to be a process in place for how to add to the dictionary, because we do use a lot of non-standard language when you surround technical conversations. So that's probably the holdup for mandating it, but I think it's something we will need to tackle sooner rather than later, because I do notice more and more spelling issues popping up in a lot of our documentation. I mean, mainly in the about side of things and like the handbook, not the actual documentation.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Phil. Okay, next one's for me. I had a confusing point in the release post on when to request reviews from leadership, so I'm obviously going to take this one because I have all the information on it now. But Mark, for your context, there was a specific step that was not supposed to be there about posting the intro for review and tagging all leadership on Saturday. So I did that, and I was not supposed to do that, even though it said I was supposed to do that. And then the second one was after we finish, or you finish everything with everybody on the 18th, when do you post it to leadership and how long do you give them for a deadline? And then it took a couple tries for Sid to give feedback. And at a certain extent, you're allowed to move forward without his feedback. And that's just not in there. So I will take this one.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I saw the conversations. I was curious to see the results of that.
It's pretty much me tagging a bunch of people and then Farnoosh saying, don't do this.
Right.
Over and over and over. So document. Okay. Take that one. Okay, another one for Cindy. Okay, so in the intro for technical writing instructions, it says that we should only include links to other items in the release post versus documentation or anything else. They are not the DRI for the intro. And as an example, in this release post, there were a couple of items that were already features in GitLab that the feature in the release post was an improvement of. And so Cindy wanted the link to the documentation for the existing feature. And then when she announced the improvement, then we linked to the other release post item. And so she's saying we should remove that for technical writers. I agree. It should be on product marketing to make that call. And that the technical writing task should simply to be, please check links and make sure they're going to the right mentioned thing. I'm going to assign that to Cindy. Okay. We have an MR to add. Oh, Phil, this is yours. Yay, Phil, you can voice over this one.
Yeah, so Chase inherited an MR and it's now ready to be put in. It adds code quality. It adds some details around code into the code quality block in the MR. I don't see a huge lot of value in it myself, and I don't know where the requirement came from. One thing it does is it will give you a warning if the release post entry title has more than, I think,
Sexy
seven
4.
words in it.
Oh.
And there are multiple examples where we do that. Particularly, there was one in the recent release post about the 2 megabyte size, and so you've got a lot of small words. So you're going to get a warning on that, which may just be noisy. I don't know if we're going to change it. I don't know why we need to keep it to 7 or fewer words in the title. I can merge the MR and we can try it out for 1312. I can let Thomas Woodham know that it's there and how to disable this functionality. But the TLDR, I don't know where the requirement came from or why we're adding this.
I don't have the background on limiting to 7 words. I think part of it is just an exercise in helping PMs be really concise in communicating business value of a feature so that you don't have 17-word secondary feature titles, of which there are 77 secondary features.
So do you want to try this out in 1312 as a sort of a pilot and see how it goes? I'll make sure that Thomas, who's the technical advisor, knows how to disable the functionality. That way, if it gets noisy or it's confusing, it can be turned off.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is just a warning. It's not blocking. People can still merge release post items. It's just automated, hey, your title's more than 7 words.
Correct. There's a code quality block that goes in the MR.
So it is 7 words without things such as articles, prepositions, conjunctions. So is it just counting 7 words? Because that's not useful.
Correct.
Okay, Mark, what do you think about that? I don't know if that's useful.
I think it's going to end up causing more confusion than it's worth, because people are going to say, well, I only have 6 words because 2 of them are prepositions. And as much as I don't know the best way to go forward with this. I don't want to confuse people, because that code quality block, I know, confuses a lot of people when they first contribute. At least it did on my team. But I do like the idea of trying to enforce some of these things in a more automated way. I effectively think that we as release post managers should be trying to manage ourselves out of a job in an ideal world.
I agree. I do think that there's a number of, here's a philosophical question. As a PM, you only have 5 to 8 of these, maybe. And you know how to write and you know how to read. And so the time it takes to prepare these is reasonable. And so as much automation as we can put in there for the rules that that person is supposed to follow, so that the release post team isn't manually checking that someone's following the rules, I think we should automate as much of that as possible.
Right. When I said manage this out of a job, I mean those managers, not as individual PMs contributing.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Just to clarify.
Yeah. So this MR only merges the check for the count of words in the title. Is that correct, Phil?
I believe there was one other check in there. It would fail but it would fail for something that's already going to fail your pipeline anyway. So it's not the only new change it was adding was checking the number of words in the title sheet.
I don't know if I get to make this call. I think that we need to kick this to Barnouche. I think we'll just call out that this is going to be confusing, but we could try it if we want to. Mark, perhaps as the next release post manager, you could decide if you want to try this out for 1312 or if this is something we should try after 14.0.
I mean, if you're going to try it, the best time to do it is between now and the 10th of May.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And we can generate some content that fails and highlights and shows the message, and then marking as to whether we keep it or remove it.
Okay, why don't we try it then? I'm just going to call out that it might end up being confusing.
Yeah, it looks like this is just adding to the existing script because there's already script, and the script already appears to verify that the stage name is correct, that the image name is correct. Yeah.
So Phil, you'll go ahead and get that merged.
Yeah, we can. If that's what we want to do, we can try that.
I think we should go ahead and try it. I don't think there's any harm here. If we get a ton of problems with it, we can always roll back if necessary, but I'd rather make a step forward and see where it lands us than not do it.
I like that. Merge away, Phil. Thank you. Okay, we have 10 minutes. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we've got 10. I'm going to skip through some if I think that they're simple and it's a clarification in a checklist, because I can delegate or complete it myself, and we don't have to sit here on this call. All right, Cindy. So product marketing has been having a discussion over the last few release posts where a very specific section belongs. In every release post, we highlight an MVP, most valuable person, community contributor. We write a little blurb about what they did and why it's important and how excited we are about it. Product marketing has wanted to include kind of like a runner-up section or other notable nominees. So our wider community contributions, the PMMs have included that at the bottom of the intro above the MVP, but it kind of downplays the MVP who had the most notable contribution for that month. And so Cindy is suggesting that we move it below the MVP, and then pointing out that it's not clear because it's not part of the process. And then John points out where it's coming from. Let's see. I think that this could go two ways. I think that as an example, if you are a PM on a team and you had a community contributor make a notable contribution to a feature you're releasing, you can call them out in the content block of that feature. Or if we want to collect them all together, I think it makes sense for it to go underneath the MVP. It's like who won first place and the runner-ups were. I don't know. What do both of you, do you have thoughts on that?
I don't have a strong opinion either way.
Okay. So I'm going to say okay, great. This is about messaging leadership. I'll take care of that. This is about linking the bugs, usability, and performance improvements to the top of the release post MR. I agree with this, and I will make the update to the template. Okay. We had some confusion on deprecations and removals this release. We did make some clarifications in our handbooks that a deprecation is the announcement of a removal, and a removal is the actual removal of a feature from GitLab. And so you use the deprecation template for 2 prior milestones, and when you're finally removing it, you use the removal template. That being said, the handbook is not the only place that we talk about deprecations and how to deprecate or remove things. They are kind of strewn across the docs in GitLab. So I am saying that from the release post perspective, which is what this meeting is, we have clarified how to handle it from the announcement side of things, and that the bigger conversation needs to happen from within engineering. So I'm going to kick this to Farnoosh to delegate outside of the release post process. Okay. Right. Kenny suggested that we use the same reviewer workflow that we use for GitLab MRs for reviewing the release post items in our process. So this sounds like a small update to the release post handbook page. I can probably action that. Actually, I wonder if I can tell Kenny to do it. Great. This is another template update. I can take that one. Almost there. Thank you both for joining me on this retro journey. Handled. Add task item for the release post manager to handle this thank view and PMMCC. I actually mark so that you're aware of whatever this change is. I don't actually know what she did here. So let's go find out. Okay, she just linked to the release post MR. Okay. I'm going to tell her it's unclear what she's saying.
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear what she's referring to.
This particular improvement was just adding the clarification between deprecations and removals, which we just talked about. I did it in this MR and it's been merged. I figured out a quick way to use Grammarly to check content blocks without copy pasting from GitLab into Grammarly. And so I recorded a video on it. And so I was going to put it in the handbook, but Farnoosh has not yet reviewed it. So this is kind of an iterative change to the, putting a checker in the pipeline. But if you just download the extension and then you enter suggest mode, it does it right in GitLab versus copying out, which is really inefficient.
Just be aware that it will send anything that you have open to Grammarly as a web page. So if you open up any sort of like commercially sensitive material, it will send that to the web page for grammar checking.
Well, I would hope that if it's going on our public blog post, it does not fall in that category, but that is a really good thing to keep in mind.
And you're working in like a one-on-one doc with somebody, it's going to send that info to Grammarly if the extension is still enabled.
That's good to know. Okay.
Sorry, my PubSec background is like never ever install an extension that sends data out. But no, I think it's a fantastic intermediate step. It's just one of those things we want to make sure people are aware of.
You're making me concerned. I don't know if we should do this anymore.
Yeah, if there's a confidential issue and it's checking that confidential issue, it's sending the data to Grammarly for checking.
Why does it do that? What does Grammarly then use it for?
I don't know what Grammarly uses it for, but you've now exported the data. So if it goes to Grammarly and Grammarly is hosted on a server that's not in the US, you've actually performed a US export as well, which is fine if it's non-commercial. But for like a PubSec client, you could never use it.
Hold on, I'm trying to organize my thought on this. Give me a second. So the concern is not actually the use of the extension in the release post item. It's the fact that we are going to get the entire product management team to download the Google Chrome extension for Grammarly, and then in their other work, inadvertently, all of this gets sent to Grammarly.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think, in your professional opinion, that it is better to advise against doing this or to put in specific instructions on taking it out after?
I would just put a warning statement that says, recognize that this gives Grammarly access to everything you type in your Chrome browser. And therefore, if you're working on anything like confidential issues or anything that could be considered security related, you should be disabling and or uninstalling the extension. It makes sense to install for the release post manager for like the week they're doing the release post probably, but it's just a recognition for anybody who hasn't installed that, and other extensions do this too. It's not just Grammarly. I have no issue specifically with Grammarly.
Thank you for pointing that out. Let me type it. We are over. I can type out the summary of that conversation and post it to Farnoosh for action.
Yeah.
And the last one's a process improvement. I'm going to kick to Farnoosh. Okay, gentlemen, this was great. Thank you for working through this with me. I'm going to end the recording now.